Just what makes the Florida Everglades so unsafe? Well, I'm here to tell you. Many people have heard stories about Bigfoot. Well, in Florida, they call it the skunk ape. Why? Because whatever this creature is, it has a disgusting smell like a skunk, albeit different. This story takes place in southern Florida, West Hollywood to be more precise. West Hollywood is a small town that lies between Miami and Fort Lauderdale on the east coast of Florida. Although it happened many, many years ago, I remember it vividly, like it was yesterday. It was the middle of summer and unbearably hot and humid. The air was thick and heavy, as if you could almost cut it with a knife. Now, during the day, the sun would be beating down mercilessly from a cloudless sky. You could actually fry an egg on the sidewalk. Forget going to the beach. The water was so warm, it felt like a hot bath. Even the beach sand would burn your feet if you did not wear shoes right to the water's edge. Now, my cousin Gary had moved to a house about 10 miles west of Hollywood that sat right in the middle of a large orange grove. His house, at the time, was surrounded by hundreds of acres of orange, grapefruit, and tangelo trees. Beyond that was the Everglades swamp. It's full of gators, deer, snakes, and all kinds of creepy, crawly, poisonous things. Some friends and I went to Gary's house on this one particular night. There was Steve, Bill, Dallas, myself, Gary, and his girlfriend, all just hanging out. We had heard on the news that skunk ape had reportedly been seen close by in the Everglades. So, needless to say, we were armed, just in case. We had a couple of pistols, a .38 Special, a .357 Magnum, and a few hunting rifles. We were sitting on the front porch, trying to stay cool because it was too warm to sit in the house. And unfortunately, Gary did not have air conditioning at this time. All of a sudden, an awful odor filled the air. If you've ever smelt skunk, you know how potent the air can become, and you simply can't escape the smell. Well, this was like that, except the scent was different than a skunk, but just as nasty. It had its own unique odor, and it seemed to get stronger as we sat there, deciding if we should go inside and try to avoid this horrendous odor now assaulting all of our nostrils. Then, we heard something that sounded like heavy footsteps coming from the direction of the orange grove behind the house. Almost simultaneously, we all looked at each other and just said the words, skunk ape. We ran into the house, each of us grabbing a gun. Then, Gary turned on the back door porch light. It was so dark, though, that the light only penetrated roughly 30 feet into the grove. Beyond that, total darkness. We all stood there looking back out the door, guns at the ready. None of us said a word. Then, we heard what sounded like branches being snapped and leaves rustling, as if something big was coming closer. We all tensed up and gripped our guns tightly. The smell was so bad by now that it was making our eyes water. We stepped out of the house into the backyard very slowly. Then, we heard what sounded like a tree branch crashing down to the ground just beyond the reach of light. Then we saw it, the skunk ape. It was roughly about 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur, its long arms ending in claws, and its face was narrow with glowing eyes. It let out this blood-curdling scream that sounded akin to a woman being murdered. I felt scared and excited at the same time, my heart pounding in my chest, and my hands were trembling. I was afraid this thing would hurt us, but I was also curious to see it up close. When it let out that chilling scream, I felt an entire wave of terror wash over me. However, I did not hesitate to open fire. I just wanted to get rid of the thing. So, even though we were scared, we shot and shot until it ran away. We don't know if we hit it or not, but it certainly ran off into the darkness. And even after it was gone, the smell had lingered for days. Now, some days later, A news report had mentioned that a farmer had found his horse dead, not very far from where Gary had lived. Supposedly, something had ripped the horse's head right off its body. Now you tell me, what kind of native animal to Florida has that kind of strength? Certainly not a cougar or a black bear, mind you. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, my brother and some of his friends went out into the Everglades hunting for deer when they found what looked like a man-made cave or some sort of makeshift den. Inside were various animal bones all scattered throughout, and it stunk like something awful. They took pictures to prove to everyone what they had found, and they thought it was the skunk ape's den. I genuinely believe that what we saw that night was actually the skunk ape. I was driving my car into town at approximately 11 a.m. in the morning. It was a Friday morning, and I recall the exact date was October 7th. It is an important day for me because it is also my birthday, which is why I remember it. Now, on this day, I was driving down Old Highway 52. The road, at least at the time, was not well maintained, and there are many cracks and potholes all throughout. Many people will often take this road as a shortcut. Anyway, I suddenly noticed that my odometer was going backwards. It's impossible, I said to myself. What? Confused, I lowered the volume of the radio to try and concentrate, listening for any sound that may have been out of the ordinary, perhaps coming from the motor. There didn't appear to be any obvious issues with my car that I can make out. I look up at the sky, though, because my eyes caught movement, and I saw something. The sky was turning from blue to dark gray. I turned, looked out the passenger side window, and I saw it clear as day. What I saw will probably blow your mind. It appeared or looked as if it was a rip in space opening above my car. It was casting this eerie glowing light that was perhaps no more than 50 feet above my vehicle. As I passed right underneath this thing, whatever anomaly you want to call it, everything instantaneously became engulfed in total darkness. Now I'm talking about so dark you could not see anything for a brief moment. And then everything became visible again. Except now it was nighttime. Specifically at 10:14 p.m. I was in the exact same spot on the road as I was when this happened, or when I saw this strange ripple in the sky. And no more than 10 seconds had passed in real time since everything had just happened and turned dark. Confused and amazed, I pull over on the side of the road to collect my bearings because, as you can imagine, I am completely shocked, trying to comprehend and process what's going on and what had just happened. I check my phone, and it reads the same time as my dashboard clock, 10:14 p.m. Even the date was still the same. Thinking there's no way this can happen, I pull up my Instagram account, and there had actually been posts that had been made by people I was following hours ago, right around the evening time specifically. I was in utter shock. How is it that I just fast-forwarded 11 hours in time? I don't know how long it took me to get my bearings together, but I could tell you it was more than 10 minutes, probably closer to 30. A few days later, being in a different state of mind now, since all this happened and having literally no way to explain 11 hours of lost time, I began to feel as if I was crazy. I searched online to try and find answers, and the only thing I could find that had anything to do with people reporting missing time is it had to do with UFOs. Now, bear with me for a minute. While I did find some common explanations in the context that this is what people pointed at: glitches in the matrix, interdimensional travel, people having a sudden moment of clarity when they come across fundamental truths about themselves, the universe, or reality, and of course, alien abductions. I was under the assumption that this is a very rare phenomenon. I'm not sure what compelled me to look up on my Instagram of all places, but after doing quite a bit more research, I've come across many people who've actually reported these so-called time jumps. Anyway, let me know if you have any stories about this, as I'm trying my best to honestly comprehend this, although I can't really tell many people because they think I'm crazy. Hi, what lurks beneath? I'll cut right to the chase. I'm a high school student in the United States, and I've been studying cryptids and Bigfoot/Sasquatch since I was 11. I've always believed in them, even though my friends and family do not. I have an encounter I would like to share with you. I was at a friend's house around the summer of 2016. Now, my friend lives in a small town just outside of Orlando, Florida, closer to the Everglades. I was sitting on a couch in his living room watching a movie when we both began hearing weird-sounding howls. I didn't think much of it until I heard his dog start going crazy. I got up, walked over by the front door, peering out the window to see what was happening. Standing right there in his front yard, right next to the tree line, was this large black mass. It was simply a dark figure. It looked like it was even bigger than the tree next to it. It stood there for what seemed like forever, and the dogs were barking at this thing. They were going crazy. Their hackles were raised. There was something about this person they did not like. As I stared closer, I noticed something that was incredibly off about this person. The fact is, they were humongous, let alone completely black. Not like a shadow. There was texture, like fur. And that's when I noticed it begin to move. My buddy at the time was standing next to me watching all of this go on. And he was completely petrified. He calls his mom and he is bawling, begging her to come home now. This thing, ignoring the dogs, almost as if it found them amusing, simply turned around and lumbered off down the driveway. It took about 3 or 4 steps, stopped, and turned its head to look back at us. Now, I want to say here just for a second that when it turned to look in our direction, as if it was acknowledging that we were watching it, or him, or her, or whoever, we could not see any facial features at all, because it was just so dark. And keep in mind, this was on a beautiful, sunny Florida afternoon. Plenty of light, but yet not enough to see any details. After staring at us for a couple of seconds, it clumsily moved its body off to the left and disappeared into the Everglades, never breaking contact with us. My friend's mom could not understand at all why my friend was so hysterical, and she would not be there for another few hours. So we had no choice but to wait. Neither one of us were brave enough to dare go outside. Not after that. I had moments of bravery where I felt like if we went out there together, we could go investigate and see who or what this was. But my friend was terrified, as I said, and he refused. I don't know what this thing was, but it was massive, and it also appeared to exert intelligence. Later on that evening, once his mom got home, she took me home and we didn't say anything about it to her. She asked us why we were so hysterical earlier, but I think we played it off because we didn't want to mention that happening to her. She would have blown us off completely. Now, fast forward the following night, and my friend had something happen. He went outside to his mom's car to get something from the car, and he says he heard something moving behind him. Startled and scared, he turns around to see these massive pair of yellow eyes staring at him only 12 feet away up in the trees. He is immediately frozen in place, and he hears what sounds like a howl or call from further into the Everglades. Whatever it was, there was 2 of these things, or more than one, at least, and it sounded like it was calling to the one that was right there. I had asked him when he told me this on the phone if he had got a good look at it, but he said because of how dark it was, all he could see was these giant glowing yellow orbs staring at him from no more than 12 feet away, about 8 to 9 feet off the ground. He was so petrified that he had finally just got the courage and strength to book it from that spot and run back to his house. I can't say for certain that this was a Bigfoot or a skunk ape or whatever you want to call it, but I do know this, that for a couple of months after this happened, his dogs refused to go outside at all, whereas before they were out all the time. It was even a struggle to get them to go outside to use the bathroom. They would constantly whimper and whine and cry. Something had spooked them. And to this day, I have no rational explanation for what had occurred that evening.